Part 32. Man at the Top of the Food Chain. Author, Seong-Lang Go. Chapter 311. As soon as Beret heard what Li Anping said, his heartbeat suddenly accelerated. Seeing his frightened look, Li Anping snorted and didn't bother to let him drive him there. Originally he didn't want to draw attention to Anna, but now it seems he has no choice. Tony's body didn't move at all, and he shot straight into the sky without any movement of energy, paused briefly in mid-air, and then flew towards the Palace Hotel in the right direction. Seeing the other party leave, the beret breathed a sigh of relief. His spirit went from being highly tense to relaxing, and he felt that his whole body was limp and unable to exert any strength. He could only look at the direction Tony left, his eyes still full of awe. That is the awe of powerful power. Thinking of this, he suddenly took out the phone in his arms and said to his superior on the other end of the phone, "Captain, something went wrong." While reporting, he turned his head to look at Robert, who was kneeling on the ground. The other party's eyes were dull, and he just stared blankly at the corpses on the ground, with no trace of fluctuation in his eyes. Beret thought in his mind, "This guy is probably useless." On the other side, Li Anping flew towards the hotel with Tony, the carrier of the void field. The powerful force acted directly on Tony's body, causing his bones and muscles to feel bursts of pain. But he didn't dare to complain at all. What Li Anping did just now not only scared Robert and others, but also scared Tony. A living human being was crushed so easily. This was the first time in more than 20 years that he had seen such a bloody scene. At this moment, Li Anping was equated with the devil in his heart. Fortunately, it was not far from the hotel. When Tony felt that his body was about to fall apart, his speed finally slowed down. "I saw a small black shadow in the sky slowly landing on the roof of the hotel. Didn't attract anyone's attention. Tony just stood there and took the time to rest. He didn't ask Li Anping anything. Because he could feel that the creature in his body was in a very, very bad mood. Li Anping was indeed in a bad mood, even though he had seized the time. But so far, more than 10 hours have passed since Anna disappeared, and the other party has not been found. In the silence, Li Anping's thoughts were released along Tony's feet, pressing down on the entire hotel in an overwhelming form. At the same time, the void field also started from Tony's feet and covered the entire building. In the hotel bathroom, a cleaner put down the mop, turned and walked towards the window. He pushed the window outward with his hand, but found that the window did not move at all. Why can't the window open? Downstairs lobby. A man hurriedly walked toward the door with his head lowered. However, when he walked through the door, he felt as if he hit a wall with his head and let out a cry of pain. He raised his head and touched the opened door in front of him with his hand, feeling as if his hand had touched an invisible barrier. The person in charge of the hunting team's operation put down the phone in his hand, with a frown on his face. 43 members were sent to capture Tony. 42 people died, which was beyond his expectation. And Tony himself has also shown strength that far exceeds the first-level abilities mentioned in the data. At this moment, a voice came from the intercom, "Boss, we found Viper and the others, at 1303. The person in charge's eyes narrowed. No matter what happened on Tony's side, getting rid of the Viper first would always increase the say in the subsequent negotiations between the two companies. Thinking of this, he ordered, "Do it." But not long after he gave the order, strange feedback came from all the team members. "Boss, I can't get through the front door. You can't get in through the back door in the kitchen either. The gate to the parking lot is blocked by something." News came one after another. Except for the team members who were already lurking in the hotel, no other members of the hunting team could enter the hotel. At this moment, the adjutant on the side patted him on the shoulder, pointed in the direction of the hotel and said, "Boss, look over there on the roof." Hearing this, he looked around and exclaimed, "What the hell is that?" A black thought energy started from the top of the building, like a flowing waterfall, and was covering the entire hotel building layer by layer. Is it Niankai? At the same time, many people in the hotel obviously noticed something unusual, especially at the entrance of the lobby on the first floor, where dozens of people, including guests and staff, gathered. They tried to break through the blockade of the void field, but it was obviously impossible. Some people who felt something was wrong had already taken out their mobile phones and started calling the police. On the 15th floor of the hotel, a white man with black hair, below his upper body, stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window of the bedroom. On the bed behind him were two disheveled women, still sleeping. If anyone from the Federation appeared here, they would probably scream because the two women on the bed were both well-known actresses throughout the Federation. Feeling the black mental energy spreading from the top of his head, a hint of displeasure flashed in the blond man's calm eyes. He snapped his fingers. Alan. The old man who had talked to Victor before walked into the bedroom silently. He lowered his head deeply, showing an unusually submissive look. Compared to the arrogant look when facing Victor before, it was like two different people. "What an arrogant guy," he said softly. "Master, do you need me to get rid of him?" William shook his head, smiled and nodded at the glass window in front of him, and said slowly, "Although it is very arrogant, it is indeed an interesting ability, isn't it?" Alan nodded and asked, "What do you mean?" William chuckled, "There is no ability user for the sample required by the teacher this time." "Yes. Then use him instead." As the changes in the hotel, the police from Convies rushed over immediately. More than a dozen police cars stopped at the door of the hotel, and the yellow isolation belt pulled up all the nearby streets. But no matter how they tried, they could not break through the void force field at the gate. A police officer pointed his finger to the sky and shouted, "Why is there a helicopter there?" The man next to him said, "It's an NNC plane. They came to broadcast live after receiving the news." "Damn, the TV station's helicopter support is faster than ours," he cursed and said, "Hurry up and let them leave." "I understand." On the other side, a female reporter in the helicopter was holding a microphone and explaining. "Dear viewers, this is Con Live. We received a tip that an emergency occurred in the Palace Hotel in the city center. The entire hotel has been completely blocked inside and outside, and no one can enter or leave. The police are now trying to rescue the people in the hotel in front of the gate." At this point, the cameraman pointed the camera at the police car and the crowd at the gate. Then the female reporter next to him suddenly made a surprised sound and shouted, "Quickly shoot the rooftop." "Dear viewers, we can see a suspicious man standing on the roof of the hotel." At this time, two helicopters belonging to the police also flew over the hotel and began to shout loudly to let the reporters leave. However, the guys from the TV station obviously ignored it, and instead kept their cameras pointed at the hotel. At this moment, Li Anping's mind energy finally swept from the roof to the underground parking garage. But no, from the top floor to the basement, there was no trace of Anna at all. Seeing the helicopter flying around, Li Anping was annoyed, and directly controlled Tony to pick out a stone from the concrete floor with 2 fingers. With a light wave of his right hand, the stone whizzed towards a helicopter belonging to the police. With a bang, the tail of the helicopter was directly broken, and it had to make an emergency landing in thick smoke. Seeing this situation, the other 2 helicopters also instantly moved away from the rooftop and did not dare to approach again. However, although Anna was not found, when the mind energy swept over the 15th floor, Li Anping still found the so-called Master William. It was exactly the same as what he saw on TV. "Say hello first." Tony raised his right hand and picked up a stone from the floor. Then, just like throwing a baseball, he threw the stone in his hand towards the place under his feet. A sonic boom exploded instantly. At this moment, the place where the stone was launched and the place where Alan was standing formed a diagonal straight line. Alan just nodded and said, "I understand, Master, please wait a moment." Before he finished speaking, the straight line drawn by the stone had passed through 6 floors and directly opened a big hole in his stomach. Then, the stone continued to move and passed through more than a dozen layers of obstacles, and directly hit the door of the hotel, leaving a small pit with a diameter of 1 meter. As for the stone itself, it had already turned into powder in this process. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, SpecialAbilities. Chapter 312. Alan looked at the big hole in his stomach in disbelief. He raised his head and could only see a figure slowly descending into the room following the sunlight. He tried his best to see who it was, but he only felt dizziness coming from his head. The next moment, he closed his eyes for the last time and fell into a deep sleep. The 2 actresses on the bed had long been awakened by the terrible crash. They looked at Alan's dead body in front of them, screamed and ran out without even having time to put on their clothes. In fact, when Li Anping fell, the void field that enveloped the entire building temporarily disappeared. A large number of staff and hotel guests came out. The police, while calming the crowd, sent armed troops to search the upper floors of the hotel. On the other side, Viper and his men all woke up from Li Anping's earth-shattering blow just now. William looked at Alan's body and then at Tony standing in the bedroom. He smiled and wanted to say something. But at this moment, Li Anping's patience had already been exhausted, and he didn't give the other party a chance to say more. He directly hit William's position with the palm. In William's eyes, he saw Tony slap him in the ear expressionlessly. As soon as he made a defensive movement, he realized that this movement was not an attack on him. The white shock wave swept directly past his ears, and the huge roar made his ears ring for a moment. When William turned around, he could only see that the wall behind him had turned into a huge cavity. A milky white air column flew upwards diagonally, seemingly piercing the entire sky. The horrifying attack caused another gasp of horror below the hotel. The reporter on the helicopter also recorded this incredible scene. The expected prey turned into a terrifying monster in an instant, and William's face turned extremely ugly. Li Anping said directly, "Where is Anna?" William shook his head, "But if you are willing to let me make a call, I will definitely be able to find the person you are looking for." Tony walked step by step in front of William. During the whole process, William did not move at all, and seemed to have completely given up resistance. "That Daxia girl who was captured by Victor yesterday. Where is she now?" A trace of nervousness flashed in William's eyes, but he didn't expect that the other party came for that woman. After looking at the distance between himself and the other party, he suddenly pointed his finger at Tony's chest. Abilities up to the 4th level are activated instantly. Wherever William's fingertips passed, the air sent out waves of vibration. This is the Johnson family's bloodline ability, Shock Wave, which can force everything that your hands touch into a state of high-frequency oscillation. It is an ability with astonishing destructive power. But in Li Anping's eyes, every vibration in the air around the opponent was clearly visible. William's fingers did not vibrate, but the air he touched vibrated. After all, this is an ability that causes the material it comes into contact with to vibrate, but the esper itself will not fall into the vibration. In just a few tenths of a second, Li Anping saw through the nature of this ability. He didn't intend to use the void field and Tony's body to test the effect of this ability. So he only did one thing. The void field covered the entire ground along the soles of Tony's feet, and of course also covered William's feet. Then it was like 2 pairs of fists on the ground hitting the soles of William's feet at the same time. William flew up instantly, and 2 balls of blood burst out from his feet in an instant. After hitting the ceiling, the whole person hit the floor again. This moment, he felt as if he had completely lost feeling in his 2 feet, and at least half of the bones in his body were broken. Then, under the control of Li Anping, Tony stepped on William's head with 1 foot. At this moment, A strange feeling filled Tony's heart. The four elements were originally aloof. When you meet him usually, you may not even bother to look at William. At this moment, he was like the lowest servant, putting his proud head at his feet. This sense of satisfaction, the pleasure brought by this power, was something he had never experienced before. William's face showed a ferocious expression, but he did not resist. Firstly, because the strength shown by the other party was far superior to him, and secondly, as the other party stepped on his head, he felt all over his body. The top and bottom seemed to be wrapped in a force. He yelled, "Wait! I know where she went." Li Anping said coldly, "Say." William swallowed a sip of saliva. At this moment, he regretted not bringing hundreds of men to canvas. "The woman you mentioned was not me who wanted to take her away, but my teacher, Virginia." Feeling that there was no response from the other party, William continued, "She is the chief scientific advisor of the Violet Group. Our four elements and Violet have always had a cooperative relationship. They are looking for some research materials recently." Research material. Feeling the chill in the other person's words, William quickly explained, "It's not what you think. I heard that Violet recently discovered an ancient ruins and excavated many valuable things inside. But when they reached the deepest part of the ruins, there is a door that they cannot open no matter what. According to the teacher's research, only the blood of certain special humans can open the door." Li Anping didn't expect things to be so complicated. He asked, "Anna, is this such a special person?" "Yes, we have found 6 similar people in the Western continent. Look at the bedside table, there is a gem." A black Niankai arm stretched out directly and grabbed a thumb-sized gem from the bedside table. The gemstone turned blue, the same color as the sea, and was extremely beautiful. William explained, "As long as you carry the gem with you, if there is a target within 100 meters, his appearance will be reflected in your mind." Li Anping looked at the gem in his hand, thought about it, and put it into Tony's arms. He continued, "Then do you know where Anna is now?" "I'm not sure now, but she will eventually be transported to the place where the ruins are. During this period, she will not be in any danger. On the contrary, the people of Violet will take good care of her." Speaking of this, William persuaded, "Although special humans like this are very rare, it does not mean that they cannot be found. If we knew in advance that he was your friend, how could we catch him? You asked me to contact the person in charge of the family, I'm sure I'll get her back within 3 days." Hearing William's words, Li Anping sneered in his heart. In the final analysis, they checked Anna and found that she was just an ordinary person with no backer, so they arrested her without saying a word. Now that William saw how powerful Li Anping was, he wanted to compromise to save his own life. He controlled Tony's solace, exerted force little by little, and said in a cold voice, "Where are the ruins?" Feeling that his head was deforming, William did not hesitate at all and shouted, "Rogers City, in the Grand Canyon to the north. That's all I know, and I have never been to the specific location." Li Anping slowly released the strength on the solace of his feet. The black thought energy directly rolled over the mobile phone on the bedside table. He threw the mobile phone in front of William's eyes and said calmly, "Call and ask them to send Anna over." Although he didn't believe that the other party would compromise so easily, Li Anping still planned to give it a try. If it's so simple to send Anna back, then it would naturally be the best. When the time comes, send Anna back first, and then you'll have plenty of time to settle accounts with the other party. However, Li Anping obviously underestimated William's status in the family. After the call, William scolded the other party bloody, and then asked the other party to send the person back before 12 o'clock tonight. After making the phone call, William forced a smile towards Li Anping, "It's all a misunderstanding. A strong person like you has always been the favorite partner of our 4 elements." After saying so many words in one breath, William he was pale and out of breath. After all, he was still seriously injured. If he hadn't been doing high-intensity exercises since he was a child, he might have fainted by now. At this moment, Li Anping felt that a large number of people were surrounding them. With the thought, he realized that the police had finally arrived. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xiang Go. Chapter 313. Feeling the police coming, Li Anping thought for a moment and said to William, "The police are surrounding us. Can you hide it from them?" William was afraid that the other party would do something hot again, so he hurriedly said, "It's okay. The police in convoys are just ordinary people. Just let me handle it." William didn't brag. The police who rushed over didn't dare to say anything to him, the eldest son of the Johnson family. He fully demonstrated the powerful power of the upper-class family in the Federation in front of Li Anping. No police took them away for investigation. In the end, all the things were pushed onto the dead Alan. The poor loyal old servant was not only killed by Li Anping, but also had to bear the blame for the hotel bombing. He became dissatisfied and wanted to detonate the explosives and die with William. And Tony became the hero who stopped him and saved William's life. The so-called justice and evil, in the mouth of the Johnson family, is just a matter of words. As the case came to an end, William was sent directly to the hospital, and Li Anping controlled Tony to prevent him from playing tricks, and stayed by his side all the time. That afternoon, the Johnson family also sent people to protect and treat the injured William. As for Li Anping, who always stood by William, no one dared to ask under the order of his superiors. During this time, Viper also came to communicate with Tony and answered a call from Tony's father. During this process, looking at the respectful faces of the people belonging to the four elements around him, Viper looked at Tony with incredible eyes. And the fact that Tony saved William's life also had a huge impact on the Abel family and the Lannister family. Until that night, William had fallen asleep on the bed. Half of his body was basically covered with plaster, with a bandage on his head and saline on his hands. A nurse was standing at the head of his bed, checking various indexes on the electronic instrument. She smiled and said to Li Anping beside her, "It's nothing, fortunately he has a good foundation, basically only fractures and contusions, just need to rest for a few months." Tony was not controlled by Li Anping at this time. He looked at William awkwardly and replied, "I'm glad he's fine, thank you. You should also take a rest." The nurse sighed, "You have been with him for 5 or 6 hours, you must have a good relationship." Tony smiled more awkwardly, just nodded and didn't say anything else. Watching the nurse walk out the door, Tony exhaled. Lying on the sofa, thinking back to what he had experienced today, he still felt like a dream. Tony suddenly asked, "Are you still there?" He was suddenly a little afraid that the other party had disappeared. Li Anping responded casually, "Yeah." Tony sorted out his words and asked carefully, "The power you used today, will I lose it after you leave?" Of course Li Anping sneered, "Otherwise, there is no such good thing in the world." Tony said with some desire, "Can I also have this level of power?" Li Anping said indifferently, "Wait until I see Anna." Hearing Li Anping's words, Tony didn't dare to say anything. Now, he is both respectful and afraid of this unknown strong man in his body. 2 hours later, the door of the ward was suddenly quietly pushed open, surrounded by a group of black-clad men. Anna stood there quietly like a flower in the wind. After more than a year, Anna's face looked thinner, but more mature than before. Although she looked tired, her clothes were neat and her eyes were calm. It seemed that William's men did not do anything to her. Anna looked at the two foreigners in the room. One of them was lying on the bed, looking like he was about to die. The other one was staring at her, which made her frown. Where are you taking me? The big man on the side raised his hand and made a gesture of inviting Anna to come in. After Anna entered the ward, he closed the door. This was what William told them to do. As for who Tony was and what happened to Anna, it was not something these men could know. Anna walked into the ward and saw Tony in front of her. She frowned and said, "You are the one who kidnapped me." Tony shook his head and was about to say something when he was controlled by Li Anping again. "Anna, it's me." Hearing this voice, Anna's eyes flashed with disbelief, and Tony walked directly in front of Anna under Li Anping's control. "Don't move." Tony put a hand on Anna's shoulder. So the void force field could transmit the sound to Anna's ears without any obstruction, but it would not be heard by anyone. "It's me, Li Anping." Hearing this voice and the other party's words again, Anna covered her mouth with her hands in disbelief. And Li Anping used his mind to sense the other party's body. Indeed, he did not receive any violent treatment. But Li Anping did not find anything special about the other party's body. He was not a person with special abilities, but just an ordinary person. He did not feel anything special at all. "Don't talk," Li Anping said calmly. "Next, I will arrange for you to return home. No matter what others ask you along the way, don't answer." Anna kept nodding, and her eyes couldn't help but turn red. Li Anping knocked on the door, and a big man outside the door came in and asked respectfully, "Sir, what can I do for you? William has already given you instructions, right?" "This lady's arrangements," he pointed at Anna. The big man nodded and said, "We have booked a flight for Miss Anna tonight." "Then send her away now." At this time, Anna suddenly stood up and looked at Li Anping firmly. "I want to stay." "Let's go." Li Anping looked at Anna and finally said, "Don't worry, I will come to you." In the end, the big men sent Anna away. In a few hours, she will reach the other side of the sea, where a large number of Daxia staff are preparing to welcome her. This time, Li Anping's return to Anna was finally completed. His purpose of coming to the Western continent could be said to be half completed. Originally, it was just Li Anping's idea to make the incarnation of Nian Qi come to the Western continent for a temporary uprising, but after taking control of Tony, he felt that he could do more. Because of the threat of nuclear weapons, his true body cannot come to the Federation, but with the help of Tony, he can do more. Li Anping took out the gem from Tony's arms with his mind and asked, "Did he react just now?" He wanted to verify whether what William said was true or false. "No." Tony shook his head. Li Anping simply put the gem in his hand and asked again, "What now?" "Yes," Tony said with a surprised look on his face, "she is in the elevator now, I can see her." Suddenly, Tony asked strangely, "She cried?" "Okay." Li Anping directly took out the gem again, sighed in his heart, and changed the subject. "Didn't you just want to become stronger and gain stronger power?" When Tony mentioned this matter, he immediately forgot about Anna. He asked excitedly, "Can you help me? I remember you once said that you can give me infinite power and make me the king of the Western continent." Li Anping chuckled and said with deep charm, "Of course, you will become the king of the Western continent." Tony screamed excitedly and quickly asked, "Then what should I do?" Li Anping said slowly in a seductive tone, "There are 2 steps in total. I will first use my power to help you control the power of the entire family. Secondly, I will let you form an alliance with the 4 elements, and even take over the 4 elements. Elements. Then use the 4 elements as petals and add the imaginary number mechanism." At the same time, they expanded their power crazily and built the Able family into the first family in the Federation. And your strength will also experience explosive growth in the process. Tony was really moved. At this time, Li Anping personally demonstrated his power in front of him. Even William, the eldest young master of the 4 elements, was vulnerable to a blow, which made Tony full of confidence in Li Anping's words. He couldn't wait to say, "I understand the expansion of the family's power, but how can I increase my own strength?" If I am not strong enough, when you leave, all this will be a wedding dress for others. Li Enping said calmly, don't worry, there are many, many ways to make you stronger. In Tianjing, inside the palace, Li Enping opened his eyes. Anna has been rescued, and he has no intention of paying more attention to the incarnation of mind energy. He believed that with the help of the incarnation of Nian Qi, Tony's status in the Federation would definitely improve rapidly, and he would be able to help him soon. As for the secrets of the four elements and Violet, Li Enping also left it to him and the incarnation of Nian Qi to find out. There was a soft beep from the computer. Li Enping walked over to look at the contents of the email and suddenly laughed. Shi Wen reported to him in ciphertext a latest achievement of the 8th Research Institute in Xindanjiang. The so-called immortality potion was successfully imitated and refined. Li Enping can imagine that Daxia's military strength will usher in an explosive growth in the future. This is really the best gift before he ascends the throne. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xianglang Go. Chapter 314. The essence of the immortality potion is the impurities left after the wild beasts devoured humans. The wild beasts devoured humans, retained the essence, and concentrated it to supply Huey's body. The excess, or inferior part, was expelled from the body as impurities. For Huey, this may be an impurity, but for most humans, it is a powerful treasure that can replenish vitality, strengthen physical fitness, and save lives. And now in Xindanjiang, after Huey's consciousness disappeared, the number of wild beasts is not large, but it still exists. Thanks to the help of Takuchi Kingta, the research institute captured several wild beasts, and by feeding them clones, it was difficult to save a batch of immortality potions for research. More than a dozen researchers who fed the wild beasts also sacrificed. After all, the wild beast's ability to ignore is too weird. But it takes a lot of time for the wild beasts to produce immortality potions, and it often takes a year to produce a small bottle. With the disappearance of Huey's consciousness, the number of wild beasts has greatly decreased, so the Institute has also given up the idea of mass production through wild beasts. After a year, the vitality that can be provided is also negligible. No one thought that the mass production of immortality potion could be developed in a short time. But a researcher accidentally discovered the connection between the two when studying Huey's cells. Finally, he used Huey's cells as raw materials and reproduced the so-called immortality potion through artificial synthesis. However, this is only the initial version, and the effect is far inferior to the original immortality potion. But in terms of supplementing vitality, it also has a very amazing effect, especially it can be mass-produced. This effect is very great. Whether it is for the improvement of personal combat effectiveness, or the improvement of the lifespan of the whole people, the improvement of medical care, there are huge effects. Li Enping immediately allocated another group of people to start a large-scale excavation of Huey's flesh and blood to increase the production of immortality potion. In the next few days, as the day of enthronement approached, the entire Tianjing looked peaceful on the surface, but underneath, it was surging. Representatives from various countries came to Tianjing one by one. Among them, there are many agents and spies. They also came here for various purposes. In addition, there are various challengers who came for the subsequent fighting competitions. The entire Tianjing city has never been so lively. You can find a capable person on almost every street and see tourists from foreign countries. But because of Li Enping's existence, no one dared to take the initiative to make trouble. No matter how turbulent the situation under the surface is, no one dared to take the initiative to cross the invisible line. And with the news from the south, the jihad organization was completely annihilated by Yan Bei and Fang Yahuang. Its main leaders were even escorted to Tianjing by Fang Yahuang himself, waiting to be tried. Tianjing city has another level 5 capable person, and no one dared to make trouble. But the overly calm situation, like the calm before the storm, made everyone in Daxialanke inexplicably uneasy. There are still 3 days before Li Enping ascends the throne. In a dark secret room, the lights were suddenly turned on. A man then opened his eyes. He was wearing a black hood on his head, and his appearance could not be seen clearly except for a pair of cold eyes. He was wearing a black combat uniform. The moment he woke up, the confusion in his eyes had turned into clarity. The next moment, 3 doors opened at the same time, and 3 2-meter-high tracked robots rushed in from 3 directions. The man seemed to have expected this. Without any hesitation, he rushed towards one of the robots. A hurricane suddenly rose in the secret room, and the wind hit the wall with a crackling sound. Along with the man's impact, the place where he was standing originally crackled and a big pit was sunken. With these noises, the man had appeared in front of a robot like a black lightning at a speed that was difficult to see with the naked eye. Looking at the robot turning around, he punched it without saying a word. The terrifying power came out with this punch, and directly rolled up waves of air in the air. There was a loud bang, and the man's fist could be clearly seen hitting the robot's chest. First, a huge dent appeared, and then the waves like undulations spread out in all directions with the man's fist as the center. The metal shell turned into countless wrinkles in an instant, and then was torn apart under this terrible force. As the fist moved forward, more metal fragments splashed out. The man's fist was like a giant beast that devoured everything, and directly blasted a terrible hole in the chest of the huge robot in front of him. Just as he retracted his fist, the 2 robots on the side turned around at the same time, and the automatic cannon aimed at the man in an instant, and the sparks of death lit up, but unfortunately the bullets could only hit the man's after image. As the man ran at high speed in a Z shape, the robot quickly turned the machine gun, but no matter how fast they reacted, the sparks flying all over could only follow the man closely, but they could not catch up with him. The man could only go around behind the robot and finish it with another punch. Through a wall in the secret room, it was a large group of researchers fiddling with various machines. What looked like a wall from the inside of the chamber was just a layer of glass to them. A white-haired old man said calmly, "How is the data for number 73? The assistant beside him looked at the tablet in his hand, and the values on it were constantly jumping. "All have reached the sample values of the mother." The assistant stroked his eyes and said excitedly, "Even in terms of strength, there is a transcendence." The white-haired old man sighed, "It's a pity that except for the time in Emerald City, we have never been able to get the target sample, otherwise the data we get would be better." At this moment, the man in the secret room was rushing towards the 3rd robot. A machine gun bullet flew past his nose. Although he was not injured, it still tore the hood on his face. The next second, with a bang, the man's entire arm sank into the robot's head. The entire robot stopped completely after a tremor. But as the last robot was destroyed, the man's mask disappeared without a trace. It was directly torn into 2 halves and fell to the ground, exposing the man's head completely. That was a face exactly like Li Enping, but more cold and ruthless, giving people a robot-like cold feeling. As the last robot was destroyed, the man's eyes regained a confused look. He pulled out his arm and stood there motionless, like a cold statue. As the sound of snapping rang out, rows of lights lit up behind the old man. Under each row of lights, there were rows of men wearing masks and black combat uniforms, looking exactly the same, like men coming off an assembly line. These men closed their eyes and were fixed in place by metal racks. No one moved at all. At first glance, they looked like rows of statues, emitting bursts of cold air. If you stretch the camera, you can see that the entire secret room is built in a huge container cruise ship. On the deck of the cruise ship, there are soldiers with live ammunition everywhere. Around the cruise ship are 7 container cruise ships of the same size. On the bow of each cruise ship, there is a huge violet painted. A total of 8 container cruise ships of more than 10,000 tons are slowly moving towards the east of the 5-star ocean. The white-haired old man said lightly, "Have you completed the modulation? All the sub-bodies are ready. What about the Star Alliance? Has the money been transferred?" The assistant did not expect the other party to ask this, and said after a pause, Probably not yet." "Well, you go and urge them. Also, how far is it from Daxia now?" The assistant clicked on the tablet a few times and said, "About 800 kilometers. Counting the time spent on land, we should be able to arrive on time." He. The white-haired old man showed a trace of cruelty on his face. "Then let this battle be a good test for my babies." Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xianglang Guo. Chapter 315. There are still 2 days before Li Anping ascends the throne. In the western continent, the canonization province of the Code Kingdom, in an underground cave somewhere. The loud hymns echoed throughout the underground space. On the huge square, there were thousands of men wearing metal power armor. They were the Templars of the Truth Church. At this moment, they all knelt on one knee, clasped their hands tightly in front of their chests, and prayed quietly to the holy statue in the middle of the square. Thousands of Templars prayed in unison, matching the hymns in the space, giving people a strange sense of holiness. What are we? Swords and pistols. What are we? Kill all the evil spirits in the darkness. What we ask for? Please the Lord's mercy, and go to hell together to wipe out all human evil. Accompanied by the uniform prayers of thousands of people, 3 tall men slowly walked towards the holy statue in the center. They were wearing black cloaks that covered their entire bodies. But even so, with every step they took, one could still hear the sound of metal colliding. These 3 people were the Grand Master and the Deputy Master of the Knights Templar. At this moment, in the underground cave, except for the knights led by Deputy Master Kron who went to Xindanjiang but were completely wiped out, all 4,454 Knights Templar of the Truth Church had arrived. With one prayer after another, the atmosphere on the scene became more and more fanatical. Under the illumination of the lights, the shadows under the feet of the Knights Templar danced like demons. The 3 men shrouded in cloaks finally walked under the statue. The leader gently lifted the cloak on his head. A head of white gold hair was revealed. It was a very rare hair color, and it fell in this dim cave. It actually emitted a faint fluorescence, making the man look full of holiness. Under the prayers of the 4,454 Knights Templar around him, he slowly knelt on one knee and stretched out his hands under the cloak. It was a pair of very clean and powerful hands, as if they were not stained with a bit of worldly dust. And now, this pair of white hands gently pressed on the ground. It was like a holy angel coming to the world. At the moment when his hands touched the ground, 9 great thoughts gushed out from the ground. The 9 thoughts were like 9 gates leading to the endless underground world. 9 corridors that could only accommodate one person were directly opened on the ground. In the superpower sequence, the strongest ability known in the theory of external system, the land of the underworld, was activated at this moment. When this ability was activated, the prayers around became louder and louder, as if the holy war was about to begin, and every Templar knight showed a burst of fanatical smiles on his face. We pray for the blessing of heaven. Until the end of the earth. Everything belongs to the Lord. We are the punishers of God on earth. With the wrath of heaven, burn all the sins in the world. In the 9 dark passages, something seemed to rise up. Along with the prayers of the knights, more thoughts were thrown into the passages from the man's body. A terrible roar came from the depths of the passage, and a dark hand stretched out from the passage. The surface of the entire passage seemed to be covered with an invisible barrier. And this hand stretched out by squeezing the thin black barrier. First the hand, then the arm, shoulder, and even the head. It turned out that a person wanted to get out of the passage. But no matter how hard the person tried, the black film never broke, like a layer of solid plastic wrap. It tightly wrapped the surface of the figure, making him look like a dark ghost, angrily trying to crawl out of hell. In this situation, the man who activated the ability suddenly shouted, and more mental energy rushed out from the passage. As more mental energy rushed out, the black ghost seemed to get help and rushed up suddenly. With a puff, as if the barrier of the world was broken, the black film burst, and the figure under the film instantly drilled out of the passage. Then there were 8 consecutive shots, and a total of 9 people drilled out of the passage. They were naked from head to toe, and their skin was all a strange gray, especially their eyes, which had no pupils at all, and were completely white. The first man who crawled out slowly stood up. He scratched his head and muttered, "Where is this? I remember I was with Li Anping." "You are dead." The man who climbed up looked unconvinced. He looked at the knight with golden hair and said angrily, "What are you talking about? Who are you? Where is this place? Do you know that I am Song Bang, a level 5 ability user of Daxia Dragon Bird?" The knight smiled and said, "My name is Paladin, the Grand Master of the Knights Templar. Song Bang, you are dead, but I pulled you back into the world. Although the time to stay is only 3 days, you have a chance to take revenge." But Song Bang ignored him, but stared at his grey body blankly, and said to himself in disbelief, "I am dead, I am actually dead." The other 8 people were all attracted by the conversation between the two. Seeing that they all looked over, Paladin smiled and said, "Everyone, you should all remember how you died, right? Song Bang, Thunder Emperor, Blood Demon, Zurong, Pluto, Kylan King, Samael, and Kron." As Paladin called the names, the people in front of him looked over one by one. "You all died at the hands of Li Anping, more or less. Now I wake you up from hell to give you a chance to take revenge." The Kylan King snorted coldly and said with a rebellious look, "What if I say no?" Paladin shook his head and snapped his fingers lightly. The Kylan King's face changed immediately. A black substance emerged from the ground, like layers of mud, along the Kylan King's legs, gradually wrapped him up completely, and finally dragged him back to the underground passage and disappeared completely. Paladin said coldly, "Then, who else disagrees?" Except for Kron, who looked respectful, the remaining 8 people had different expressions, but no one objected. So the Templars then gave clothes and armor to the 8 level 5 ability users. However, their grayish-white faces and pure white eyes made them look more like zombies than humans. Then each of them was given a piece of information, which recorded some of the situations that happened after their death, as well as a rough estimate of Li Anping's current strength. Among them, Songbang's reaction was the biggest. His face kept changing, and he shouted, "How is it possible? Li Anping, that bastard, how could he, how could he?" The reactions of Thunder Emperor and Blood Demon were also not good. They didn't expect that after they died, the world would change so much, and Li Anping's strength rose rapidly, reaching an incredible level. In contrast, the other few ability users who died later were not so surprised. After all, when they were killed, Li Anping's combat power was already amazing. However, the development of Daxia in the past year and the power shown by Li Anping in Xindanjiang are still enough to shock them. Hades said coldly, "Counting the 8 dead people here, plus the 3 of you, there are a total of 11 level 5 ability users. But even so, they may not be able to deal with Li Anping now." Behind Paladin, a man also took off his cloak. This middle-aged man with silver hair had a pair of eyes that seemed to be able to see through everything. He was one of the 3 vice leaders of the Knights Templar, the Eye of God, Walford. That's right. With the fighting power of everyone present, it may not be possible to defeat Li Anping now. And as time goes by, his strength is getting stronger and stronger, and there is not much time left for us. So we must hurry up. The sooner we eliminate it, the lower the danger. And this time, it's not just our family that besieged Li Anping. After hearing this, Hades and others looked different. Walford didn't care. He suddenly turned his head and looked into the crowd, there. With Walford's words, Tang Vihan, who was disguised in the crowd, felt a palpitation, and felt that his heartbeat seemed to stop at this moment. In front of him, there were 11 level 5 ability users. Just when he was feeling lucky, Walford actually walked straight towards him. Without any doubt or pause, he walked straight in front of Tang Vihan. Behind him, the other 10 level 5 ability users looked at him at the same time. Feeling the eyes of these monsters, Tang Vihan's heart sank. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xianglang. Chapter 316. The day before Li Anping ascended the throne, it was 6 o'clock in the evening. Amastrian Federation, City in the Sky. The conference room was filled with smoke. The ashtray on the round table was filled with cigarettes and ashes. On the side are various documents, forms, photos, and half-eaten meals. At this time, Lestat, who was like an ancient nobleman, slapped his palm on the conference table and shouted, "How long will we continue to discuss? It is now 6 o'clock in the afternoon, and we have up to 30 hours to take action. But we are still sitting here leisurely discussing whether to participate in this operation or not." Vivian, who was also from a noble family, frowned and said, "This action is too hasty, and with Daxia's current strength, it is too dangerous to attack rashly. Besides, once so many level 5 ability users start fighting, do you think we can come back, several? It would be better for the Queen to take Violet, the Knights, and Li Anping to both sides. Both sides will suffer." Lestat sneered a few times, adjusted the glasses on the bridge of his nose, and said with disdain, "Don't you understand yet? This will be a battle related to the direction of history. In this battle, we will win. The winning side will become the master of the entire world in the next 100 to 200 years. Vivian did not answer, but looking at her disdainful expression, it was clear that she did not agree with Lestat's views at all. At this time, Woody, who was wearing jeans, said, "I agree with Wei Weian. If we also participate in the war, then there will be more than 20 level 5 ability users gathered in this battle. What will be the result? There are too many variables. That's not what we're good at." Lestat snorted coldly, "Then are you just waiting for Li Anping to kill us one by one after he wins?" He turned to look at Judy Ano, who had been silent, and asked, "Head, you how to say?" Judy looked at the 4 level 5 ability users present, including Woody, Lestat, Vivian and Giant Shield, and said nothing. Instead, he asked the assistant on the side, "Is there any news from Tyrell?" The assistant looked at the computer screen on the round table and shook his head, "Not yet. Wait, they have news." Jadun became excited and shouted, "How about it? Who will they send to Daxia?" Beside Lestat, who was fighting, and Vivian and Woody, who were negotiating, all looked towards the assistant. As one of the 3 traditional powers in the Western continent, Tyrell's actions were obviously crucial. The assistant paused and said slowly, "They gave up this operation." "What?" Lestat said in disbelief, and immediately walked over to read the message from Tyrell in person. As for Vivian, she nodded and said, "Obviously Tyrell is just waiting to see what happens, waiting for both of them to lose." At this time, Woody had a different opinion. Maybe the villains in Annihilation Abyss are not that kind. Maybe they can't say it on the surface, but secretly they have already arrived in Tianjing, ready to trick us behind our backs at any time. At this time, a group of people started arguing again, ranging from whether to participate in this operation to whether Tyrell had any conspiracy behind it and whether the Queen would betray them. Will those tin cans of the Knights ignore the conflict with them? This is the difference between the Federation and the Codex State. The Codex country itself is a country of politics and religion, and is extremely united. After the Pope's words, the Knights Templar immediately went on an expedition to Daxia. This won't work here in the Amastrian Federation. Although the President also hopes that they will participate in this operation, the opinions within the imaginary agency are not unified. After all, they are not as united as the Order of Truth, they represent more than just themselves. There are also the interests of various factions and families within the Federation. This is complicated and deeply entangled. No one can figure it out. There are too many difficulties for them to go to Daxia to participate in this unprecedented melee. First of all, who stays at the headquarters is a big problem. Among the 5 people present, only Judy Ano had the right to make a decision, and only after she made her decision, the rest of the people present did not dare to object. Therefore, the real purpose of the previous quarrel between several people was to impress Judy Ano, rather than to persuade the other party. Among them, Giant Shield and Lestat supported the fight, while Woody and Vivian were relatively conservative and unwilling to wade into this muddy water. Just when a few people were at a stalemate, Judy looked at her mobile phone and suddenly answered a call. Seeing her answer the phone, the people who were arguing stopped unconsciously and all looked at Judy. Huh? Really? Are you sure? Judy's eyes showed a look of surprise. After a moment, she nodded and put down the phone in her hand. She looked at the eyes of several people looking over and smiled. Do you still remember that we formed a combat planning team against Li Anping more than a year ago? They have achieved new results. You mean those nerds? Judeng said amusedly. You don't really believe them, do you? Their psychological warfare last time had no effect on me. But the lightsaber they made is quite useful. Lestat wiped his glasses and said, I heard that the Department of Defense spends 30% of its budget on this team, but in my opinion, they are just wasting money. Judy shook her head. It was just that the time we gave them was too short, but this time, their discovery was extraordinary. Half an hour later, a tall, thin man walked into the conference room. He wore a pair of black-rimmed glasses and held a stack of folders in his hands. Facing the scrutinizing gazes of several level 5 ability users, his eyes were slightly evasive and unconfident. Only Judy Ano looked at him with a friendly face and said, Hello, Dr. Jim Parsons, I would like to ask you to introduce your latest invention to us. Jim nodded and distributed the documents in his hand to the hands of several people present. Hello everyone, I think everyone here knows that mankind is currently very efficient in utilizing energy, from traditional coal, to oil, to now nuclear energy, even the most advanced nuclear fusion device in the Federal Laboratory. Probably only 0.7% of mass-to-energy conversion can be achieved. Vivian frowned and said, You mean the hydrogen bomb? Yes, ma'am. Jim nodded and continued, in contrast, if matter can collide with antimatter, it will achieve nearly 100% mass-to-energy conversion, and the high-energy gamma rays it produces can destroy everything. Lestat's expression also became serious. You mean you invented an antimatter bomb? It's not that simple, sir. Currently, the storage and control of antimatter is still a worldwide problem. You must know that the annihilation of antimatter and antimatter is 1054 times more powerful than the nuclear fission reaction, and... Okay, Dr. Jim. Judy Ano stopped him from continuing and said bluntly, we don't need to know the theory, just tell them what you have created. Okay ma'am. Jim said slowly, after a series of painstaking research and using the protons and antiprotons in the Federal Laboratory, because of a coincidence, we accidentally created a controllable 6.6135 kilograms protons and antiprotons, that is, 3.3067 kilograms each of protons and antiprotons. Giant Shield asked curiously, is this powerful? What use can it be? Is it more powerful than a nuclear bomb? Jim nodded and replied, each gram of positive matter and antimatter can produce about 180 trillion joules of energy, which is equivalent to a 60,000 ton nuclear bomb. And there are 3.3067 kilograms here, which is 3,306 of 60,000 ton equivalent times. Hearing this, everyone, including Giant Shield, was horrified and moved when they heard this answer. It is equivalent to a 200 million ton nuclear bomb. It is enough power to destroy the world. Even level 5 ability users cannot turn a blind eye. Even most level 5 ability users cannot survive this kind of attack. But Jim hadn't finished speaking yet. He looked at the document and continued, but if the target is Li Enping, we think that compared to a simple bomb, by focusing the optical radiation of the annihilation reaction, the explosive performance of these protons and antiprotons can be quantified into a beam, more effective. We call it, the light of destruction. Judy Ano asked coldly, how powerful is he? The light radiation is enough to kill the entire population of Tianjin. All the buildings will be instantly ignited, the entire city will be plunged into a sea of fire, and everything will disappear in that flash of light. Very good. Judy Ano nodded and looked at Giant Shield, Lestat, Woody, and Vivian. I think we can change our plan. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xianglang Guo. Chapter 317. On the day of the coronation ceremony, it was 5 o'clock in the morning. In the sky 200 kilometers away from the west coast of the eastern continent, a spaceship that is more than 1 kilometer long, rectangular in shape, and looks like a black coffin is slowly heading towards Daxia. At the very front of the spacecraft, at the edge of the top, Shang Zhenbang was sitting there defenselessly. He stretched his feet out of the edge of the spacecraft. A strong wind blew, and it seemed that he would fall at any time. Behind him, a tall white man was walking slowly. He was none other than Solomon, a 5th-level ability user who once represented the Star Alliance on a mission to Daxia. It's just that at this moment, his face no longer had the high spirits of the past, but instead looked extremely tired. Only when you see Shang Zhenbang's back, can you see a trace of confidence in his eyes. I've been looking for you everywhere, why did I come here? Shang Zhenbang said calmly, it's nothing, I just suddenly wanted to see the sunrise on the sea. I have been on the boat for so long and I haven't had time to appreciate it. Really? Solomon smiled and sat next to Shang Zhenbang, that is indeed a beautiful scenery. After saying this, the two fell into silence. After a long time, Solomon took out a milky white gemstone from his arms and handed it to Shang Zhenbang's hand. It is a spiritual gem made by the Queen of Heaven, which allows the user to have a 5th-level spiritual force field within 24 hours. We all got it, this is your share. Shang Zhenbang took the gem and put it casually into his pocket, seemingly not caring about it. Solomon didn't take it seriously either, and he didn't know why. He always felt that after sitting next to Shang Zhenbang, the previous nervousness before the war had disappeared. Originally a strong man like him at the 5th level. There are basically no things in the world that can make him feel nervous or scared. But their opponent this time is Li Enping, an opponent so powerful that it can make people despair. In fact, it wasn't just him. Most of the people on the ship were nervous, including Titan, White Dwarf, and Yulia, who had a sure-hit gun. Emotions. Especially him, White Dwarf, and Yulia. As ability users who had personally fought against Li Enping, they could feel the despairing power of the other party. But for some reason, Solomon found that as long as he stood next to Shang Zhenbang, the nervousness and fear gradually went away, and it seemed that Li Enping was no longer so scary. Seeing Shang Zhenbang's calm demeanor, he finally couldn't help but ask, aren't you scared? Shang Zhenbang glanced at him doubtfully, then turned to look at the sea. He said casually, why should you be afraid? Solomon sorted out his thoughts and said slowly, our main force this time is mainly high-level ability users and mechanical soldiers, but mechanical soldiers can only be used to suppress ordinary ability users and the army, and abilities like myself, white dwarf, and titan, or, even if he reaches the 5th energy level, there is nothing he can do about Li Anping. The real main force against Li Anping this time is you, Yulia and Barnes. Look at Yulia, she has been so nervous that she hasn't eaten for a whole day. While Solomon kept talking, Shang Zhenbang patted him gently on the shoulder. Look. The sun is rising. When Solomon heard this, he looked and saw a bright light piercing the darkness in the sky. Then a blazing fireball slowly rose from under the sea, turning most of the sky red. Seeing this natural beauty, Solomon stopped talking and quietly watched the sun rise slowly from the horizon. 1 minute. 2 minutes. It wasn't until 3 minutes later that Solomon suddenly let out a startled cry. The sun in the sky has not changed. He seems to have remained motionless in the rising state. Not only the sun, Solomon looked up and found that everything around him seemed to have stopped, just because he was in the sky. The surrounding area was too empty, he didn't realize it until now. Whether it was the flowing clouds in the sky, the rays of the sun, or even the arc underfoot, or the sea below, everything fell into absolute stillness at this moment, and not even a sound could be heard between heaven and earth. Solomon suddenly turned his head and looked at his shoulder, where Shang Zhenbang's palm was resting. He asked, "You used your power on me?" Shang Zhenbang shook his head, "I didn't use my ability on you." After saying this, Shang Zhenbang stretched out his hand. Solomon felt his eyes blurred, and the whole world seemed to have returned to normal at this moment. The clouds in the sky began to flow, and the light of the sun began to change, as if everything around him came alive again. Solomon shook his head, "This ability of yours is too weird. I still can't understand it." But Li Anping probably can't understand it either. He is looking forward to what his expression will be when he looks at this. Shang Zhenbang didn't speak. He just looked in the direction of the sunrise and quietly watched the rare scenery in front of him. At this moment, the communicators on the two men remembered. Solomon picked it up, looked at it, and said, "Let's go, it's time to gather." The leader asked us to go over. As he spoke, he turned around and looked at the person next to him. Shang Zhenbang, who was standing next to him, found that the other party's figure had already disappeared. Solomon shook his head and walked slowly to the conference room. When he entered the conference room, he found that everyone was already there except the queen. Including him, there are a total of 6 of the most powerful ability users in the Star Alliance. In addition to the ability users, there are 12 humanoid bodies about 3 meters tall and shining with metallic luster standing in the corner of the conference room. These metal humanoids look perfect. They look like enlarged versions of humans, without any armor, and their skin is silvery white. Every line on their body and the shape of every muscle give people a feeling of boundless power. Solomon knows that these 12 mechanical soldiers are extraordinary. They are the ultimate warriors created by the Star Alliance with more than 10 years of effort, using adamantium as the main material and countless world-leading cutting-edge technologies. Even if it weren't for the huge pressure from Li Anping, which made the entire Star Alliance try their best in this year, they would not be able to create these 12 ultimate weapons. The combat effectiveness of any of them is not lower than that of the level 5 ability users. Even as long as they have sufficient energy, more than half of the level 5 ability users may not be able to do anything to them. Their cost is also high. Adelman alloy alone is a resource that cannot be replenished. In addition, the technology and various top materials contained in it are inestimable. An ordinary small country may not be able to build one even if it spends all its national strength. But even such a powerful war weapon cannot become the protagonist in today's battle. Just as Solomon was thinking about this, the door of the conference room opened again, and the leader of the Star Alliance, the only 6th level ability user in the world, finally appeared. But it was not only the queen who appeared in the conference room. Behind the queen, there was a white-haired, skinny old man who was looking at everyone with a sneer on his face. Yulia frowned and said, "Alliance leader, who is this old man?" We don't have time to take care of the old, weak, and disabled this time. However, Titan on the side stopped him from continuing, and looked at the old man with an incredible look, muttering, "Damiel Donner." The old man smiled evilly, glanced at the Queen of Heaven and said, "I didn't expect that even now, someone still recognizes me." Hearing his personal admission, the faces of several level 5 ability users on the side all changed. The world's first level 5 ability user, moving natural disasters, causing the deaths of tens of millions of people by himself. Any one of them is enough to make people unforgettable for life. White Dwarf was the first to complain, "Damiel Donner. Queen, are you crazy? Let this killer join us." "I disagree," Solomon also said, "he is too uncontrollable. Who knows if he will suddenly go crazy and kill people." The Queen stopped them from continuing and said lightly, "There is nothing to talk about this matter. He will join our operation, and I promise that he will never do anything that is not good for you. Everyone, get ready. Violet, the Knights, and the imaginary organization are all here. There are still 6 hours before the operation begins." Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xiong Lango. Chapter 318. Tianjing, in the Imperial Palace. 11 o'clock in the morning. There are still 2 hours until the coronation ceremony officially begins. The palace was full of busy women. Xiao Suesu, wearing a headset, directed a group of women in the palace around. "You guys, go and see how the guards' uniforms are doing. Is there any problem? The band is here? Let them go to the auditorium first. You prepare lunch for them and let them eat first." A maid came to Xiao Suesu with a bouquet of flowers. She immediately shouted, "What are you doing?" She snatched the bouquet from the other person's hand. "I said that gold must be used in the square, don't you listen? Understand? This is yellow, not gold." She shook her head and asked the maid to continue her work. She then threw the bouquet into the trash can nearby. At this moment, she noticed that everyone around her had stopped, as if they had realized something. She turned around suddenly and saw Li Anping standing behind him. Behind him were Jingguang, Yan Bei, and several other young dragon bird guards. "Your Majesty," Xiao Suesu lowered his head and saluted, "please change your clothes quickly. The ceremony is about to begin." Li Anping looked around and found that Jingguang and Yan Bei were all wearing formal attire today, looking like handsome young men, more like stars than soldiers. After all, they have to follow Li Anping on a week-long tour of the city today, and then they have to go on TV. Anyway, their main role is to show off, and they can't really protect Li Anping. Therefore, when choosing, Xiao Suesu and Yajiao Sheng both chose better-looking ability users. Li Anping nodded towards Xiao Suesu. Although he doesn't like to dress too grandly, he also knows that today is a moment like this. Not just for himself, too many people have spent their efforts on this, so he will not refuse. I saw Li Anping, led by Xiao Suesu, go directly to the locker room. He just stood on a huge floor-to-ceiling mirror. There were 3 staff members around helping him put on his dress, and a makeup artist and hairstylist were helping him tidy up his appearance. Looking at himself in the mirror as if he had been beautified, Li Anping couldn't help but smile. Just when he smiled slightly and shrugged his shoulders slightly, the back of the entire dress suddenly shook. It was torn apart in half. The 3 women who helped him put on his dress immediately jumped up and wanted to lower their heads and admit their mistake. Xiao Suesu on the side said hurriedly, "Bring a spare set over here, go quickly." While directing everyone, she said respectfully to Li Anping, "Your Majesty, please restrain your strength. We are already using the best materials for these dresses." "Okay, I understand." Li Anping nodded to express his understanding. After all, he usually wears atmospheric armor made from a nihilistic standpoint, and is used to a relaxed state. However, formal clothes are heavy and tight, so Li Anping is naturally not used to it. But then he tried his best to restrain his strength, and it didn't happen again. Yanbei and Jingguang were standing aside, and they had nothing to say between them. On the other hand, the maids on the side couldn't help but glance at them. Then whispered something. Finally, under the encouragement of everyone, one of the fat girls walked towards the two of them. She looked at Jingguang's handsome and sunny face and said excitedly, "Master Jingguang, can you sign your name for me?" Jingguang looked at her, and then at the expectant maids in the distance. He said helplessly, "I didn't bring a pen." It's okay, I brought it with me." She took out a notebook and pen from her arms. He handed it directly to Jingguang. Jingguang had no choice but to finish the book and start signing. "Where is it written?" "It's good here." The girl's eyes seemed to be filled with little stars when she looked at Jingguang. She asked excitedly, "Master Jingguang, will you participate in next week's fighting competition? If you participate, you will definitely win the ability person. First place in the group. The team has a rule that no dragon bird guard can participate, so I won't go." As he said that, Jingguang handed the notebook and pen signed with his name to the girl. The girl accepted it happily. "Sir, thank you. I will definitely keep it as a family heirloom." Seeing the girl skipping away, Yanbei said with disdain, "It's so easy, being an idol." Jingguang snorted and replied, "I am not as shameful as your ability." Yanbei stared at Jingguang and shouted, "What did you say?" Originally, Yanbei and Jingguang fought against each other for the first time, which also caused Yanbei's mission to fail, which made him very unhappy as he always thought he was invincible at the same level. Although they joined Daxialonke together, the relationship between the two has not improved. They have always been in charge of their own affairs, and each has a group of supporters. Although Yanbei looks good, because his ability is collapse and can kill with one hit, the fewer people know about it, the better, so he is not suitable for publicity work. Hearing what Yanbei said, Jingguang sneered, "I heard that you relied on Fang Yahuang's ability to wipe out the jihad in southern Xinjiang. It's really good for us." Yanbei laughed, "At least I caught Peter Parker, but you have been following him for several months and still failed, right?" Several young team members behind the two men watched the two men's anger getting stronger and stronger, but there was nothing they could do about it. These two seniors are beyond their control. At this moment, Li Anping in front of the mirror turned around and shouted to Jingguang, "Hey, come here, the makeup artist said she wants to help you touch up your makeup." "Touch up your makeup?" Jingguang frowned, "No need." Quickly Anping only added one word. Jingguang had no choice but to walk towards the makeup artist. Yanbei, who was standing by, patted his shoulder and said disdainfully, "Go, pretty boy." Just then, he heard Li Anping calling again, "Yanbei." Yanbei's body stiffened, and he saw Li Anping hooked his finger at him, "Come here too." Yanbei was not like Jingguang, who dared to refute Li Anping's words when encountering something. He still clearly remembered that he was slapped to the ground by Li Anping like a pancake, and the pain all over his body was still fresh in his memory. So his fear of Li Anping was much greater than Jingguang's. At this moment, he heard the other party's order and did not dare to say a word, just did it. More than an hour later, Jingguang and Yanbei followed Li Anping out of the locker room. At this time, they were wearing complicated black and red dresses, and with their carefully groomed hair and faces, they looked more elegant than before. At this moment, Scorpion walked up to Li Anping and said slowly, "Your Majesty, the motorcade is waiting for you at the west gate." Li Anping asked, "Are you on duty today?" Scorpion bowed and said, "Yes, but Audrey is here too." After all, today is a big deal, and all the team members who are on vacation are back. Although Li Anping's suppression made it impossible for the entire Tianjing to have any problems, there were still guards in the palace. And Scorpion was transferred to the palace and was responsible for the work of the guards with Audrey. This is a position of real power, with good treatment, but without having to stay on the front line for a long time. Scorpion, who is already married, is very satisfied with this. Li Anping patted Scorpion on the shoulder and said, "Do a good job." Then he got on the car and drove towards the west gate of the palace. According to the plan, they will start from there, parade around Tianjin city, and then return to the east gate of the palace to hold a formal ceremony in the auditorium in front of the palace. The entire coronation ceremony is expected to end within 4 hours. Li Anping, sitting in the car, looked at the palace outside the window and asked, "Are all the people here? Any news?" Yan Bei looked at the computer in the car and reported to Li Anping, "Our people are all here. But Lord Xing's plane is delayed and may arrive later." Li Anping asked again, "Are the Federation, the Code Country, and Tyrell all law-abiding?" Yan Bei nodded. "According to the information from the intelligence department, there is no unusual movement in the 3 countries. Their envoys have all arrived and have not made any abnormal moves. They should be waiting in the auditorium to watch the ceremony now." Li Anping nodded. Whether it was the news from the intelligence department, or his ears and eyes, they all told him that everything was normal and there was no danger. But with the amazing intuition gained from countless battles, Li Anping felt vaguely that things were not that simple. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Man at the Top of the Food Chain. Author, Xianglang Go. Chapter 319. Tianjin, on 12th Avenue. 1 o'clock in the afternoon. There were bustling crowds on both sides of the avenue, and the central road was blocked by horizontal bars. There are more than 10 kilometers of similar roads, which were the route of Li Anping's parade. Many ordinary people in Daxia, as well as foreigners traveling to Daxia, stood on both sides of the road, waiting to watch the parade. In the sky, a helicopter flew over from time to time. They were all reporters from the TV station, preparing to shoot the parade from the air and broadcast the parade live from beginning to end. On the streets during the parade, a police officer stood every few meters, ready to maintain law and order. 11 Lan, who came from a small country, and his master were also standing on the street at the moment, looking at the excited crowd around them with curiosity and expectation. Unlike most ordinary people, the most important purpose for people with abilities like him to watch this parade is to take a look at Li Anping. The man who is currently recognized as the strongest in the world and has the power of a god. He is like a peak, enough for countless capable people to look up to. As one of the ability users, 11 Lan naturally wanted to see with his own eyes what this Li Anping looked like. This is completely different from watching TV. 11 Lan looked at the growing crowd around him and sighed, "There are so many people. Our star doesn't have so many people even during the Chinese New Year." His master said, "Of course, our entire country only has more than 2 million people, and here in Daxia, Tianjin has a permanent population of more than 30 million, plus the foreigners who came here today. Like today, the situation is expected to last for several days." However, although there were many people, there was a faint layer of thought energy surrounding the two of them. Although ordinary people around them were very close to them, no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't really squeeze in. They are like two rocks in the sea, standing here despite the wind and rain. Master suddenly remembered something and reminded, "By the way, if Li Anping appears later, don't sweep him away with your thoughts. Do you understand?" 11 Lan said impatiently, I know. The ambassador has said it many times, and I feel like the calluses are coming out of my ears." The master shook his head. Although he talked a lot, he was right this time. "Just remember." 11 Lan nodded casually, suddenly narrowed his eyes, pointed to the other side of the street and said, "Master, look, that person is so strange." His master looked in the direction pointed by 11 Lan and saw a man in a black coat walking slowly among the crowd. "The reason why he is strange?" It's just that he looks very strange. Although he wears a hat and a coat, his gray skin can still be seen vaguely under the clothes. There are currently no gray-skinned humans. However, his master was not surprised and just said, it should be a bloodline or mutation type ability user. There are so many ability users in Tianjing now. You can see all kinds of mess. Although 11 Lan agreed with what the teacher said, she still felt that the man was very strange in her heart. But when he turned around and looked again, the man had already disappeared. On the other side, the strange gray-skinned man passed through the crowd and walked into a deserted alley. And behind him, one police officer patted his colleague and said, "That guy is a little weird." "Which guy?" "Forget it. I'll go take a look." After saying that, he followed in. The police turned into a deserted alley and saw a man walking slowly in front of him. "Hey, wait a minute." The policeman quickly chased after him and stopped 2 meters behind the strange man. He put one hand on the gun on his waist and asked, "Are you an esper? Have you registered?" The man didn't speak, he just lowered his head and turned around slowly. "Hey, I want to ask you something." The policeman saw the gray flesh on the other person's chin, frowned and said, "What's the matter with you? Take off your hat." The man smiled, slowly raised his palm, and took off the hat. With this action, his entire face was exposed to the man. It was a face like that of a dead person, with gray-white cheeks and pure white eyes without pupils. He could act in a zombie movie without makeup. It was obviously the first time that the policeman saw such a horrified face, and he subconsciously took a step back. However, he seemed to realize that it was not polite to do so. He was about to say something, but found that the man had already rushed towards him. When he had just half pulled out the pistol from his waist, the man's gray-white palms had already covered his entire face. The next moment, his entire body seemed to be twisted into a ball of noodles and sucked directly into the man's palm. When he opened his eyes again, he could only see a gray sky and a bloody moon hanging in front of him. In front of him, stood thousands of Templars wearing power armor and holding chainsaws and swords. At the moment when the policeman disappeared, this information had been transmitted upwards layer by layer at an extremely fast speed. First, his colleagues reported to the leadership, and then the police submitted it to SpecialAbilities. So 5 minutes later, the 2 Dragon Bird guards were teleported directly to the alley where the incident occurred, but the other party did it very cleanly, and the policeman could not leave anything behind. After some investigation, the 2 Dragon Bird guards found nothing, and the missing policeman was still not found. So they applied to use the intelligence network. This information was directly uploaded to Lu Feng and Lu Sheng, who quickly approved the request and forwarded it to Momo. Deep in the base of SpecialAbilities, Momo connected the mind energy on his finger to the supercomputer and was doing new work. Suddenly, he received an application to use the intelligence network. He didn't think much about it and just entered the name of the missing policeman into the intelligence network. Government personnel like this, who are in Tianjing, are all monitored by Li Qian's ability. Wang Zheng, he muttered the name, and the relevant information about Wang Zheng immediately popped up on the screen. Wang Zheng had a fried egg sandwich in the morning, and then began to prepare for the security task during the parade. Momo began to scroll down quickly, and he jumped directly to the end, wanting to see where he disappeared. Wang Zheng followed Hades to the alley. Hades sucked Wang Zheng into the underworld. Reading this, Momo's breathing had unconsciously become heavier. Wang Zheng was stabbed in the chest by Nightclot of the Knights Templar. Wang Zheng died. Momo looked at the information in disbelief and shouted, "How is it possible? The Pluto should have died, how could he appear again? Could it be someone with the same name? No, there is the underworld, could it really be the Pluto?" Just then, the computer suddenly sounded an alarm. "What's going on?" Momo looked at the screen with a serious face. Under his operation, a large number of numbers were swiped down from the screen like a waterfall. The information displayed on the screen showed that a large-scale power outage began to occur throughout Tianjin. Just as the senior management of SpecialAbilities began to investigate the abnormality in front of them, Li Enping stood on a specially made car and began a parade. He smiled and waved to the people on both sides of the street. Every wave could bring a large number of cheers. But when SpecialAbilities discovered the existence of the Pluto and a large-scale power outage occurred in the city, he did not change on the surface, but he was murderous in his heart. The terrifying spirit surged out of his body in an instant, dispersing in all directions like a tsunami. In the eyes of ordinary people, Li Enping is still Li Enping. But in the eyes of the ability users, Li Enping at this moment is simply like the incarnation of hell. The spirit rushed with strong malice and slaughtered hundreds of millions of humans. At this time, Li Enping seemed to have a strong smell of blood in his spirit. The surrounding Jingguang and Yanbei were the first to turn pale, feeling that they were in front of the gate of hell. This is when Li Enping did not target them, but simply checked the surroundings. Some ordinary ability users on the street were even more unbearable. They were either pale or trembling, as if they were crawling in front of the only king in the world, fearing that any transgression would be hit by thunder. On a high building 500 meters away from Li Enping, Shang Jinhai looked at the black spirit in the air and his heart sank. Exposed. Which bastard is so careless? He turned his head and looked to the side. Yulia was holding a giant sniper rifle more than 2 meters long, aiming at Li Enping. Shang Jinhai looked at the spirit that was close at hand and was about to sweep them. He didn't care that Li Enping could hear his voice and shouted directly, "Yulia!" Damn it, I know. Yulia was sweating nervously, and the scope was aimed at Li Enping's eyebrows. The next moment, Li Enping turned his head and looked at her position. That expression seemed to be able to see him 500 meters away. Just a glance made Yulia's heart almost slow down. Go to hell, monster! The trigger was pulled, and with Yulia's roar, the bullet that was sure to hit had been fired. The sound of the gun directly resounded through several blocks, and with this shot, it also represented that a century-long battle belonging to the highest force of mankind had begun. The strong lose, the stronger win. This is a war for the strong. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xiong Go. Chapter 320. When people hear gunshots, their reactions are different. The first reaction of ordinary people is to run away directly, while the first thing for trained police or people with special abilities is to determine the location of the gunshot and then choose a shelter. Before the gunshots came, Li Enping had already seen where Yulia was. He could see her eyes, her face, and even every pore on her cheeks. Almost at the same time as he saw the sniper rifle in the other party's hand, Li Enping's brain had calculated where the other party's gun was aimed. So almost at the same time as Yulia pulled the trigger, he had already blocked his right hand in front of his forehead. But it was useless. Because Yulia's must-hit gun does not need a trajectory or a barrier at all. When the trigger is pulled, it means a hit. The moment the bullet was fired, it came directly in front of Li Enping. It ignored the mind energy, ignored the void force field, ignored Li Enping's right hand, ignored all obstacles between the two, and directly touched Li Enping's forehead in a zero-distance way. Hit. Penetration, thermal energy, electromagnetic, radiation, none of the powerful attacks imagined came. The bullet that hit Li Enping's forehead only splashed a little blood. Blood. Li Enping's nose smelled bloody, but the bullet just now might be able to penetrate the head of an ordinary person, but it would definitely not break Li Enping's skin. So where did the blood come from? Smelling the bloody smell from the tip of his nose, Li Enping reacted instantly, "This is not my blood. Just to let the blood splash on me? Is this the premise for activating a certain ability?" On the other side, when the bullet hit Li Enping, Yulia and Shang Jinhai looked at the person standing behind them together. It was a tall woman with wheat-colored skin and many small braids on her head. Activate the ability. Barnes, hurry up. The woman called Barnes put her hands together at this moment, and the mind energy on her body began to burn violently in an instant. It seemed that she was about to activate her ability in the next moment. When he realized that blood was the prerequisite for the other party to activate his ability, Li Anping had already bent his legs slightly. He did not waste time to judge what the other party's ability was, or how to crack it. Because he knew that no matter how powerful the ability was, as long as the ability holder died, it would lose its effect. So when everyone around him had not yet reacted and just realized that there was a shooting, Li Anping had already jumped lightly and flew in the direction of Shang Jinhai and the other two. With a loud bang, the car under Li Anping's feet had turned into a pile of scrap metal, and he himself had crossed a distance of more than 500 meters. Appeared in front of Shang Jinhai and the other two. Yulia, Shang Jinhai, and Barnes appeared in front of him at the same time. Yulia carried a gun, Shang Jinhai was on guard, and only Barnes put his hands together, obviously activating his ability. So after appearing in front of the three people, Li Anping directly retracted his arms and bent his elbows. A straight punch hit Barnes's position in the air. As the punch was thrown, the air became violent in an instant, like a mad Tyrannosaurus Rex, with enough force to shatter people, and blasted towards Barnes. The white bombardment wave cut through the sky at this moment. The terrible momentum could be seen by almost the entire Tianjin. But after throwing this punch that was enough to make the world change color, Li Anping frowned. Because this punch didn't hit anyone. At the moment when Li Anping threw the punch, Yulia, Shang Zhenbang, and Barnes all disappeared. The three people disappeared directly like ghosts, making Li Anping's punch completely miss. Invisibility? Teleportation? Or what ability? While thinking about these, Li Anping's mind energy swept across the space of hundreds of meters around him unscrupulously, and immediately found that the three people who had just disappeared had left the roof of the building and came to the 10th floor of the building. Sensing the location of the other party, Li Anping's body shook slightly, and he had already sprinted in the air to the position of the 10th floor, and then he rushed directly towards the three people. Wherever he passed, there was a series of crackling sounds, and everything, whether it was glass windows, walls, desks, or iron cabinets, was smashed to pieces in an instant. But before Li Anping came to them, the woman named Barnes suddenly shouted, and the mind energy on her body dissipated by half in an instant. Ability, activated successfully. On the other side, after Li Anping soared into the sky, the people around him screamed immediately. Whether it was the previous gunshots or the situation that Li Anping soared into the sky and the car was directly crushed, it was enough to scare them. So the riots were born, and all the ordinary people ran around like headless flies, fleeing to all the places they thought were safe. At this time, the role of the police began to appear. They tried to appease the crowd and reduce the damage. Behind Li Anping, Jing Guang frowned. Something is wrong. I can't contact the headquarters. Me too, Yanbei grinned. It seems that there are really people who don't know how to live or die. Jing Guang whispered, there can't be any problem with His Majesty. Anyway, calm the crowd first. The next moment, Jing Guang's body was filled with energy, and he had transformed into a blonde and blue-eyed transformation, and rushed towards the crowd. Wherever he passed, everyone was directly overwhelmed by the majestic thought energy like the sea and fell to the ground. Even those with abilities were not surprised. Faced with the overwhelming thought energy, no one could resist for a moment. The crowd was calmed down as quickly as possible, and the commotion disappeared as quickly as it came. But at this moment, a shrill scream suddenly sounded from the crowd. When Jing Guang heard the sound, he turned around and saw that the scream came from a man. A violently rotating chainsaw sword struck his waist, and then cut the man in half like a tree. A man in power armor held up a chainsaw and slashed at the crowd, laughing wildly. Death. Infidels. This was like a signal to start. Almost not a second after the man's screams ended, a large number of Templar knights appeared in the crowd. They all wore power armor, held chainsaws and swords, and used a kind of he looked at the crowd with bloodthirsty eyes. He shouted, "Accept the judgment of the Lord. Sinful pagans.